Good morning, everybody. We are just about ready for GoJo and Golic. Here's what you have to look forward to coming up on today's show. Lots to get to. It is a Wilder Tuesday. Charlotte Wilder will join us to give all her takes that she has been loading up on for the week. Okay, then we were in Paris. We're going to do our Olympic review, the medals, everything we got to get into about what has been going on over the past 24 hours, and market crash, stocks and bonds. We will be talking the stock. No, I'm just kidding. We're not talking about the stock market, but we will talk about Super Bowl odds. All that and more coming up on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here with you guys. We got a fun one today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday on the DraftKings Network. Charlotte Wilder, as Jesse mentioned, coming up in hour number 2. We'll get into plenty of Olympic conversation. And Katie Barnes going to join us at the end of the hour here to talk about everything that's gone on with the Imane Khelif situation in Olympic boxing, as she is getting set to fight again coming up later today. And so we're going to revisit that after last week, where a flurry of misinformation kind of took over that conversation. But, Dad, we've got plenty of football to get to this morning. I thought it was going to be college football coming up, as we had the coaches' top 25 release yesterday, in the coaches' poll, I should say, for the beginning of college football season, which obviously had me very excited. And then Brandon Aiyuk decided to go and upstage everybody with all this news that we got last night.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be fights. We have the joint practices going on, and we have fights everywhere, reliving the day a little bit of when we used to fight all the time at practice. I thought it was going to be that, but then you're right. Brandon Aiyuk gets permission to seek a trade, and he thought it would be to the Steelers or to the Commanders, but those two are out for various reasons. So it looks like it's the Cleveland Browns or the New England Patriots. Just San Francisco doesn't want to pay him. He's on that fifth-year option of $14 million. They don't want to pay him. He wants to move on. Now it's just a matter of finding the right deal for him. It seems both the Patriots and the Browns have deals that the 49ers would accept in return for the trade. Now it's just a matter of which deal they'll take, as opposed to which deal Brandon Aiyuk would take for a new contract from either one of those teams as well.
Yeah, the ball is essentially in his court now, is what all of these reports, have been designed to tell us. And it was Matt Maiocco from NBC Sports in 49ers country and Mary Kay Cabot, I believe, from Cleveland.com, who was reporting on all the angles of this, Dad. But what it boils down to now is, you're right. The teams that we had always thought, Washington and the Pittsburgh Steelers, when we had mentioned this conversation around Brandon Aiyuk, that I feel like we've had over and over since the spring, were always the ones, especially the Steelers, that jumped to mind. And now Washington took themselves out of the race, reportedly, and the Steelers were not able to meet what the 49ers wanted in return for a trade, and that's been anywhere thought of from a first-round pick to a second and a day 2 pick in an upcoming draft, a veteran player potentially thrown in this as well. And, Dad, that's where the Cleveland Browns get super interesting in this, because when we think about this, and if it would actually finally happen, which I guess I want to start first and foremost there, Dad, we are now, a week into training camp. We have already gone through the Hall of Fame game, and we're getting ready to come up on preseason 1 this weekend. We'll talk about some of what we're looking forward to watching in those games here in a little bit. Are you surprised at all that the 49ers let it get to this point and get to this far, to where weeks before the start of the actual season, there is the possibility now, the distinct possibility they have laid out, that they could be without their number 1 wide receiver from last year?
Yeah, I am surprised that it went this late, because you need to let a new receiver get acclimated with the system. Now, if it were the Patriots and if it were Kendrick Bourne was with the 49ers as late as 2020, from 2017 to 2020. So he was there. If it's the Browns, it'd be Amari Cooper, who at 30 years old is older than Bourne, and obviously Brandon Aiyuk is just 26 years old. So integrating another wide receiver into an already pretty talent-laden receiving core, including Christian McCaffrey catching the ball out of backfield, and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, as opposed to Aiyuk going to Cleveland or New England and trying to be the number 1 receiver on a new team. And get that acclimated to an offense, because the receiver coming to San Francisco isn't necessarily going to be the number 1 receiver. The receiver leaving San Francisco and going to Cleveland and New England is going to be the number 1 receiver. So I guess it's on San Francisco's part. I do think it is a bit late, but at least they'll be able to integrate their new receiver, if they were to get one, in with an already talent-laden group, as opposed to Cleveland and New England.
The way they've set up the power structure here, Dad, it feels a little bit like when Lamar Jackson was on the franchise tag and going through what, in some people's mind, felt like as close as we were going to get to a caliber of that quarterback in free agency, but we knew really it was sort of hamstrung by this idea that they could always match here. And with the 49ers, they have laid this out, because I have no doubt these are reports that have probably come out from 49ers land to basically say, hey, the ball's in Brandon Aiyuk's court now, and he's got this decision to make here where he can do this. And the 49ers have said, hey, with these 2 teams, we'll accept it and go. And when you look at, and this is the leverage that we talked about a little bit with Tua in Miami, that also applies to the 49ers, is they can basically say, to your point, Dad, if he picks one of these teams, Cleveland, you could say, probably satisfies both a little bit, but that's a team that's probably still predicated a little bit more on the future. There's reason to believe that team is a playoff caliber team and a Super Bowl caliber defense, but offensively, there's still a lot of questions and a lot of guys coming off from injury that gives me pause going into this weekend. The Patriots move would definitely be a move about the future and about money if you're Brandon Aiyuk. They can give me, which, by the way, if the notion that the Patriots are now the home where you can go and get paid your market value as a position player in the NFL, we will have the surest sign that times have truly changed from the Bill Belichick era in New England, but that one is definitely predicated on money in the future, because we know they're nowhere near ready to go compete. Brandon Aiyuk would help a lot breaking in a young quarterback, but then you've got the 49ers that are obviously set to be the best team in the NFL, or the best roster in the NFL right now. So as a player, Dad, having to sit there and grapple with that, am I ready to take a potential decided step back in the short term here to secure my financial future, or does that part of competition, just being accustomed to being in the NFC title game every year, start to weigh on your mind a little bit?
Well, it doesn't seem to be weighing on Aiyuk's mind.
No.
He seems to be wanting that new deal. San Francisco's not getting him that new deal. You don't know where your career is going to take you, even though you're 26. You're invincible at 26, though players understand injury can take a lot away to try and get the bag when you can get the bag. And if he can get it by one of those teams, I've talked about this in a matter of free agency, but in this case, when a player has a choice like Brandon Aiyuk has, either Cleveland or New England, it's what motivates them. And listen, it's not a fault when I say money motivates you. That's not a fault. I wish more players would go to a team and say, yeah, money was the reason. I mean, it's okay. It's okay to say money was the reason that you went somewhere, because they're two franchises in different directions right now. As you said, New England is building from the bottom up, and Cleveland could be in the mix depending on how their quarterback plays. So it all depends on Brandon Aiyuk. You know, the money he's getting from both. How different is it? Is it more in Cleveland? Is it less in Cleveland? But the opportunity is better to make the playoffs. So this is all Brandon Ayuk's decision. Is it purely money and he's go for the biggest deal, no matter what team it is? And if it's New England, it's one of the worst teams in the NFL. Then so be it. I mean, that's he has been given that choice by the 49ers. Go seek a trade and seek your deal. So it is now in Brandon Aiyuk's hands to where potentially he wants to go.
And I mean, if all things are close to equal monetarily, Cleveland would seem to be, in my mind, the more obvious choice in terms of getting both of what you want. Now, listen, the idea of tying your future success to Deshaun Watson, who since he's returned from suspension has looked nothing like the quarterback that Cleveland paid for, would give you a little bit of pause. But again, to your point, this is clearly heavily financially motivated, and that would give him the best opportunity to at least go there and be able to achieve something in the way of success on a team that was a playoff team last year, despite all the injuries that we saw, and one where, listen, Kevin Stefanski, the playbook is not all that dissimilar in terms of some of the things that he wants to do, and we say Amari Cooper likely included in it. We don't know that for sure. I mean, if the off chance that Cleveland could hold on to him and offload somebody else, now all of a sudden you've got a hell of a receiving tandem. But to your point, the 49ers, while I think they've made a mistake in letting it get this far, and I think they could have probably and should have probably found a way to pay Brandon Aiyuk before the rash of receiver contracts hit this offseason, his value to this team positioned against others on the roster. I know a lot of people are doing the side-by-side of him and Deebo Samuel right now. I think he's important enough to where you should have gotten this done early on. At the same time, being the 49ers and having the juggernaut roster that you have, Dad, means I'm only going to downgrade expectations so much, even if they were to lose him right before camp, because that's how good this roster is overall and what they recoup in terms of a veteran there. Amari Cooper would make me feel a lot better than Kendrick Bourne. I would say that. Like, if they pulled that back, then yeah, you can onboard him at a slower pace at the beginning of the season and have a ceiling that still somewhat approaches that. If it's Kendrick Bourne, then all right, we're talking about an offense that really does not have a true number one receiver, because Deebo Samuel doesn't operate in that role. That would give me a little bit more concern, but I would have to trust that the 49ers weren't going to let him walk out of the building unless they're getting immediate return, because this is a chips all in year for them.
Yeah, and think of the money that San Francisco is going to save pulling in either Amari Cooper, who's in the last year of his deal at, I think, 1.2 mil. I think he's $8 million against the cap. And then Kendrick Bourne has 3 years left on his deal, but his cap numbers are 3.2, 7.9, and 7.9. So not damaging at all, considering they were going to pay Aiyuk 14 this year. So getting back, they'll be in the number situation that they want. But I agree. And again, there's a year different. Kendrick Bourne is 29, Amari Cooper is 30. So who you would be getting back? Again, we should throw the caveat in, if they are getting back a wide receiver.
Yeah, so a lot of ifs out there in the universe, but this is, I sort of scoffed at the notion because I saw some non-reports about this early in the day, but then last night, all of a sudden, we start getting reporting on both sides, or at least two sides of the potential two deals in play here, that a framework for a deal for Brandon Aiyuk is in place. There are two teams that the 49ers have reportedly given their blessing to, and now we wait.
And you figure San Francisco is thinking, okay, Aiyuk was our leading receiver, and he's played well. He's lived up to getting a new contract. Make no mistake about that. But they also have to realize, while he had 75 receptions, Christian McCaffrey had 67, Kittle had 65, Debo had 60. So they have the talent to spread that ball around for another receiver coming in to make some catches and still maybe have a positive effect on this offense, even though Brandon Aiyuk isn't going to be there. Where as opposed to Cleveland or New England, he would definitely be the number one guy, and there isn't a ton around. Even though Njoku had himself a year in Cleveland with their 5 quarterbacks, he was actually the leading receiver on that team, a few ahead of Amari Cooper.
The elephant in the room is Kyle Shanahan. This is the hubris you get to operate with when you've got what people largely view as the best play caller in the NFL and a guy that's a weapon in his own right. So it does change the math a little bit on that. There's no doubt about that. So plenty more to keep an eye on in that situation. But Jesse, like we said off top, we had big news in college football yesterday with the top 25 from the coaches poll coming out. So what do we got here? What did we see from this?
No surprise, Georgia's at the top, right? Okay, nobody's surprised to see that. All right, perhaps a little surprising, it's only teams from Power 4 conferences that have cracked the top 10. And we got to talk about Notre Dame, right? They're at number 7, you two. I know, I can feel the energy from both of you. And what are they up? The final coaches poll of 2023, they were 16. So up 9 now. Pretty good for them, right?
Yeah. It's a tough day to be a Notre Dame fan and talk and walk out in public and try and act like everything's okay because, yes, you look up at this and it's all the same names and faces that you're familiar with, Dad. Georgia, widely expected to go back and get to their national title winning ways again. Ohio State's loaded up on the Death Star roster. Oregon is as well positioned as maybe any team's ever been to jump into a new conference and immediately make waves as they're in the Big Ten. Texas nipping at their heels going into the SEC, on and on down the list. But Notre Dame at 7 yesterday, we all had kind of a rough one around here. If anyone is not deep in Notre Dame lore right now, Notre Dame starting what is expected to be the starting left tackle, Charles Jagusa, unfortunately suffered a right pec injury in training camp and is going to be out for the year, which for a team trying to replace 2 tackles that were taken in the first 2 rounds of the draft, Dad, and is walking into their first game at checks notes Kyle Field at Texas A&M, where Mike Elko, a coach that was one time the Notre Dame defensive coordinator and knows their DNA very well, and was also the head coach for Riley Leonard, Notre Dame's now quarterback, last year and knows him very well and has a cavalcade of star pass rushers up front. I have felt better in recent weeks about my life than I did yesterday. I'll just say that. I don't know how you felt. You wear this a lot less emotionally than I do, but you're in South Bend, so.
Yeah, well, listen, this was the best tackle prospect, left tackle or right tackle that Notre Dame had on the roster, and now he's gone, as you mentioned, replacing 2 tackles. Now, there's no glass half full, but if you're going to say a positive side, you have almost a month to prepare somebody else. A lot of it, too, is when an injury happens and when you give time for a backup who will become a starter the chance to get acclimated to the starting role. So there is time. The game is August 29th, and it's August 6th. So you have time to acclimate somebody new. But it's a definite loss for all the reasons you just said. The D-line of Texas A&M, the new coach at Texas A&M, and his familiarity with Notre Dame, and who you're replacing on the offensive line for Notre Dame, and just the difference in some new receivers, some transfer portal guys. Audric Estime gone in the backfield, though it's been a running back by committee, though they're a bit. It puts more pressure on Riley Leonard, right? The quarterback who can throw but can run incredibly well and will be part of the running offense of this team. So it's more will fall on him. So it was a tough blow for, I know people are like offensive linemen. Offensive linemen can make one hell of a difference on a team. There is no doubt about it. So
I think it's the first place almost all of us should look when breaking down a lot of these teams. Like, I was just really starting to go through and get dialed in more on a lot of college football notes yesterday. And the first thing I wrote down, and the first thing most people track, is returning starts on the offensive line or returning starters. Now, I always bless that with the caveat of, if those starters coming back aren't very good, development, yes, is possible, but you've got to look at all the parts involved. It's not always probable. So, yeah, that's a big one, Dad, that puts a lot of pressure on Riley Leonard and on, listen, Mike Denbrock, who's coming in now as one of the most richly paid offensive coordinators in football, was one of the biggest acquisitions for Notre Dame this offseason, coming off a year where he helped groom the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Jaden Daniels in that offense at LSU. And listen, Riley's not Jaden Daniels, but he can run in a very different way. And I'd imagine for Mike Denbrock, who would spread out and give his quarterback lots of room to be a dynamic athlete, there's going to be an interesting tug of war to see, do you do that? Do you go back to more of what he did at Cincinnati where it's multiple tight ends to try and offset that? I will be very intrigued by that. But, Dad, if you look up at the rest of the top 10 and the teams that are true contenders right now, amongst the college football elite, Georgia's bringing back 4 returning starters on the offensive line. Ohio State's bringing back 3 starters and getting another starter from the transfer portal. Oregon's got 3 starters back. Texas has 4 of their 5 back on the offensive line. Like, it's no secret a lot of these programs have set their foundation up front. So when we talk about this as a big deal and you see this headline, it's not lip service. This is what brought Texas back last year, was offensive and defensive line competency. So I just think as we get going here, it's worth keeping in mind as we look at a school like Michigan that's hockey line changing almost an entire NFL offensive line that was the face of their franchise for a while. This is what's at stake for people.
Yeah. There's no doubt. As I said, they'll have some time to replenish. You can't replace a guy, but build the new depth behind who the new starter is going to be. It's a bit of a crapshoot when it was your best tackle on a rebuilding offensive line. There's no doubt about it. And a quick aside, I love how they call it the coaches poll. The coaches don't vote in this poll. I mean, the coaches don't vote.
Someone the coach tells to vote votes for them.
Yeah. I mean, the SID will tell the coach, hey, this is what we're going to do. The coaches are too busy coaching their teams to worry about actually filling out a ballot on the top 25.
Yeah, no, most of these coaches I could actually believe are so oblivious to what's going on around things outside of their team right now or the immediate ones on their schedule that they might actually brain fart that, which perfect segue. Coming up next, Jim Harbaugh yesterday speaks at the podium in Los Angeles when asked about the sign stealing scandal, and you will never believe what he had to say. Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield here along with Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. And fellas, yesterday we discussed the draft of allegations for Michigan. And you know who else discussed it? Jim Harbaugh. Here's what he had to say in his defense.
Never lie, never cheat, never steal. I was raised with that lesson. I have raised my family on that lesson. I have preached that lesson to the teams that I've coached. No one's perfect. If you stumble, you apologize, and you make it right. Today, I do not apologize. I did not participate, was not aware, nor complicit in those said allegations. So for me, it's back to work and attacking with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind.
Guys, big, we're all trying to find the guy who did this energy. And if he's going to attack the day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind, I, for one, am scared. I also am just wondering what you guys think of this. Are you surprised he went full denial here?
Full Conor McGregor. That was what I thought of first, Dad. I would like to apologize to absolutely no one was the tenor of this speech. And no, I'm not surprised. And Dad, we said this back in the fall. And I remember I talked to enough people that I trust that were reporting around this, where I could really wrap my mind around the idea that out of desire for plausible deniability and for all these other reasons, Jim Harbaugh actually was not made aware of what was going on with this sign-stealing scandal, and that Jim Harbaugh, his personality type, could be so oblivious to the non-football winning things that this was actually possible. Now, obviously, since then, I can't believe that in the time between when this all came out, the multiple suspensions, the offseason, everything else with Jim Harbaugh's future in the balance, that he's probably not aware of some of this stuff. But deny has sort of been this flavor of the day around Michigan for a while, which I would say is the advisable strategy when dealing with the NCAA, by the way. But it lands us here to where, no, I'm not surprised at all when Jim Harbaugh reacts like this.
Yeah, and the only way Jim Harbaugh is going to be brought into this is if somebody uses his name in the investigation. It says, well, Jim Harbaugh knew, or Jim Harbaugh said this or said that. And you know, there's the plausible deniability route, and then there's the what do we always talk about with, especially with college coaches, that they know absolutely everything that's going on with the program. Now, to say absolutely, that can be wrong, and maybe not everything, but pretty damn close to everything. They run the ship. And also, he did not cooperate with the NCAA on giving up his phone for any messages or things like that. So, you know, I don't know if that was a one for all for one for all, whatever the terminology is, or nobody's giving up their phones and we're all sticking together and not doing that. But we know that there have been phones that were deleted with messages. We don't know that about Jim's phone because he wouldn't give it up. So there are things that make you wonder, did he know what was going on, to his complete denying what went on. And he's not there. He's not going to be part of the investigation. The most that could happen to him is a show cause, which would only go into effect if he went back to college, you know, where they could discipline him. So I don't see that happening, or at least anytime soon see that happening. So he just went with deny. But it's tough to think that a head coach doesn't at least, you know, peripherally know what's going on, especially something this intricate in his program.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of the battle I'm fighting. Because, again, like I trust what I've heard, but I also believe what you've said. And that's been my line forever is, hey, you're the head coach. And this is the line that we always got as players, and we heard from them, is you're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. And either way, the buck stops with you on that. So if you didn't know, that's your fault. And if you do and allow it to go on, then obviously you're complicit in it as well. So nothing would surprise me in terms of what came out of this investigation or what comes out of this notice of allegations at this point on that front. I can definitely say that, but he's just such a strange enigma of a personality himself that's the only reason it throws me off balance in terms of what my usual North Star is with that stuff. But either way, like you said, and it is interesting because part of Jim Harbaugh making the jump to the NFL, people talked about him trying to skate these allegations and all that stuff. But the thought in the backdrop for whenever Jim Harbaugh went to the NFL before all this was, well, if it doesn't work out there, he can always go back to college because a coach that's accomplished at the level he has in college would always be in demand. And now that does complicate things. So he is someone who I don't think will struggle to keep NFL jobs either, even if it doesn't work out with the Los Angeles Chargers. But the bloom would definitely be off the rose to an extent if this goes poorly with Justin Herbert and company, which it could.
I would not, Mike, see him having one issue. Say it all falls apart in the NFL. I would not see him having one issue going back to college, even with a show cause. I think a school would hire him, knowing he would miss a little bit of time just for what he accomplished. So I don't think that would inhibit a college from hiring him, if in fact it got to that point. And we have no idea if it will or not. But it was surprising, the complete deniability when there are other terms you can use for an ongoing investigation and not wanting to comment. He went full on, which again makes you wonder because Jim can be so out there. Hell, is he telling the truth? Did he really have no friggin' clue of what was happening? Because don't wait for the Netflix documentary on this because you're going to learn nothing on it. We so looked forward to some of those and we've learned nothing, and I don't expect we're going to learn anything here either.
No, you're so right. I saw people wondering if this had been released by the NCAA in order to undercut some of what was getting ready to come out in that documentary. If past is predictive with all these untold docuseries on Netflix, you're not going to learn a damn thing on that. They're going to withhold all the good stuff because they got these guys to sit for it themselves, Connor Stallions being at the center of that. But yeah, Dad, I always joke that because of sports talk radio, you speak in bits and work in bits a lot of time in life. Jim Harbaugh speaks in coaching slogans nonstop, and this is just another opportunity for him to go and belch coaching slogans into a microphone at an opportunity. And he did a great job for it. Like the enthusiasm unknown to mankind branding is always there. The way he set it up and delivered it, quite honestly, was even better showmanship than I expected. So aces all around from Jim Harbaugh going through this press conference and continuing to deliver on the cult of personality that has made him sort of this fascination going on to a team that a lot of people point out doesn't really have anyone for his quarterback to throw the ball to.
And it doesn't hang over his head either. It's not like this hangs, over him. He's coaching the Chargers now. He's coaching in the NFL. So it's not like, what hangs in the balance for him. As we said, at worst, it's a show cause, which he could care less about because he's coaching in the NFL. So him and other coaches, Jesse Minner, who went with him, is been accused of recruiting violations and a separate issue. From the Connor Stallions thing, as other coaches have as well. There's level 1, there's level 2, but for the coaches that are gone, now some of them may end up having to go back to college and the show cause may get them. So we'll have to wait and see.
I was going to say, once you said Jesse Minner, I was like, oh, that could potentially be trouble there because we see coordinators get sawed off in the NFL all the time.
Right.
And a coordinator that young going over to a defense that needs that much help could certainly be interesting. But it is. And I saw a lot of people, a lot of people did like the Dark Knight Rises meme of Bane pushing his buddy down in the plane and all these different things about how Jim Harbaugh really left Sharon Moore in some people's eyes holding the bag on this. This is just like Pete Carroll leaving USC, and the way that you mitigate all this is by winning. If Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL and wins, this is going to be a minor footnote in the way that we talk about him as a football coach going forward, considering he brought a championship to his alma mater. He's already taken an NFL team to a Super Bowl, and now he's got the quarterback to potentially load up and try and make another run at that in the coming years, even if we don't believe it's this year with the Los Angeles Chargers. So that's just one headline coming out of Chargers camp. Eventually, we'll get to talk about football there, and we've got preseason games coming up this weekend that'll allow us to do it. But coming up next, Dad, you mentioned it off the top. We got joint practices going on right now leading up to the first preseason game this weekend. And joint practices are an invitation for one thing and one thing only, fight night. So coming up next, we'll ring the bell and take stock of who's been running toward the pile and who's running away from it next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Guys, we got to talk about camp stories, joint practices, what's going down right now. So Lions and Giants found themselves in a couple scraps, okay? And we had a particularly good one with the coaches getting Daniel Jones out of the middle of it. Take a look. Oh, yeah. Yep. You got to get Daniel Jones out of there. Get him out of the middle of that. You don't want Daniel Jones scrapping it up. Come on, look at him. Look at him go. And the coaches are like, get him. Yeah, guys, no duh. Daniel Jones shouldn't be in there. GoJo, didn't you say something like the coaches were like, hey, man, that's not your job?
No, Brian Burns was saying that. One of the defensive players for the Giants that they just acquired this offseason came out after and was like, listen, Daniel's a competitor. We love that. Save that for your offensive line because we need you out there actually helping us win games this fall, which is sort of encouraging, Dad, to hear in a camp where Daniel Jones' future has kind of felt like it's in question, that he's getting that vote of confidence from one of their new guys there. But he's absolutely right. The quarterbacks need to get the hell away from the pile.
Yeah, they do. I mean, again, he was sticking up for his old lineman who got pushed down by a D lineman supposedly after a play, but I don't believe that because D linemen never do anything wrong. And then supposedly he pushed the Lions D lineman in the back, and that started the scrum. There were like 8 fights in this joint practice. And it's certainly one of the downside. Now I've told stories that we fought all the time. We had joint practices, we fought. We had practices amongst ourselves, we fought. To the point where it was too much. I mean, you don't need to fight that much. It just disrupts practice. But when you're hitting the same person and then you get to hit a different person on a different team and it's hot out and you need to get the better of somebody, tempers are going to flare. I saw Timmy Grunhard, a former player with the Chiefs, tweet out after. It said, this is why Andy Reid doesn't do joint practices. You don't deal with the fights and the skirmishes and things where you can get somebody hurt needlessly. For the most part, the fights are just pushing and shoving, but you can get away with more in a fight in a practice than you can in a game where you're going to get tossed. You can get away with a little bit more in a fight, especially in a scrum, and someone can get hurt. And again, it just disrupts, and this is what coaches hate the most, disrupt the flow of the practice. And it can do that. So even someone like me who was a average player who lived on stepping over the line occasionally and didn't mind fighting and actually looked forward to fighting and getting in skirmishes and shoving people around and getting shoved around in return. I can understand why it can just be debilitating to a practice.
I love hearing you guys talk about this stuff because you always bring in that it's hot, which is just boy math. If it's hot, the boys are fighting.
You're hot. You're already a little pissed off. You're kind of tired. You're in the middle of camp. It's absolutely a part of the boy math that factors into all this. But Dad's right. For a certain sect of the population in the NFL, you've got to subsist on fighting. Back end of the roster, guys, everyone trying to slug it out. It's a way to get noticed, quite honestly. And it shows up on tape. You want to be the guy getting after it, going through the echo of the whistle, running towards the fight. Those are all things that people keep track of. You don't, and I heard McAfee talk about this yesterday, and we've talked about it plenty. When they turn on the tape, you don't want to be the guy that's just standing there. You want to be running towards the fray, but at a certain point, it does knock practice off kilter, and we've talked about the importance of these joint practices to coaches at a time where the preseason is a very different structure. They've structured these practices specifically together to try and get something out of it, have Dan Campbell and Brian Dable, and you get a lot less of that when everyone's just swinging every other play. So hopefully they can put that on pause long enough to actually get something out of this before they play this weekend. But Jesse, this is interesting here. Let's go back to Patriots camp a little bit. Matthew Judon was the subject of a lot of consternation the other day in the back and forth that he had with new coach Gerard Mayo. So we got to finally hear from him a little bit, it sounds like.
Yeah, still looking for a new deal. And here's what he had to say about his conversations with the front office.
I feel like that's every conversation, right? You regardless of the emotions involved, you try to get to a understanding. And I think just because we don't agree don't mean we don't understand each other's side.
Pretty diplomatic there. He went on to say that he's working on a 1-year, $6.5 million deal. So not often that we talk specifically about the numbers, but he's kind of trying to put it out there this is low, right? Well, so he's like, you can hear about it.
Yeah, he is. And now he's coming off only playing 4 games last year. So he said there's a hierarchy in salaries. The top players get the top salaries and you get slotted in. He said, certainly after playing just 4 games and being injured, I'm not looking for the top salary, but I know I'm worth more than $6.5 million. So there was all the look of the when he didn't practice in the first padded practice, and it seemed like he and Gerard Mayo had a conversation. He walked off the field, came back on, and was talking to the GM. He's missed one other day, but has been practicing. I think the last 4 practices been practicing full, and he's not going to miss time because, as he said, he's not going to give back any money. It's still $6.5 million is $6.5 million, and he's going to play for the $6.5 million if the deal doesn't get worked out. So he's being very diplomatic in his conversation, certainly publicly, to try and keep everybody kind of on the same level.
Yeah, the interesting part for Matthew Judon, who's 31 years old, so he's not a spring chicken anymore, and you understand why this stuff starts to feel pressing when you get to that age. You're coming off an injury. You want to be protected in these situations, especially when you feel like you're undervalued on a defense right now that we know. Remember, we talked about Christian Barmore, unfortunately, dealing with the blood clots, and that's something the Patriots are going to have to monitor for their other great force up front going forward. But Dad, Matthew Judon was on a tear before that injury last year where I think he was averaging like a sack a game basically. And if he comes back and performs anywhere near where he's normally performed, he's still going to command a decent amount of money even going into his age 32 season. So, but it is, and we talk about this all the time, it's one thing for a quarterback, it's another thing for people that play the violent positions to go out there and wager on their body holding up when they just went through it not doing that same thing. So hopefully there's some middle ground here because, again, what he's asking for in the grand scheme while you've got a rookie quarterback is not a ton in terms of the money that would make him feel protected enough to go out there and get the best out of a guy that you need to help star on this defense. So we'll wait and see what happens with him there. Jesse, last one we wanted to get into here, Jordan Addison obviously has had a tough offseason, was charged with misdemeanor DUI and could actually face a suspension, it sounds like.
Yeah, so usually like a suspension like that going to take some time, right? But if it comes this season, it's going to come at a bad time for the Vikings, right? Especially if it's early in the season. Do you think that could come down that early? Also, you just hate to hear about this stuff being arrested for a DUI. Like, we've talked about this 1,000 times, but it's like, take an Uber, man. Are you kidding me?
Well, and unfortunately on this team, you had the tragic loss of Kyrie Jackson. It was reportedly a drunk driving incident, not where he was the driver, but where his car was struck by a drunk driver. And so to have both of those exist on the same team is a really brutal blow. And like you said, indefensible in terms of the decision from Jordan Addison. But Dad, in terms of and setting that aside briefly for the football aspect of this that Jesse brought up, which we know is secondary. But I think a lot more of the beginning part of the season is still going to be predicated on what they see from J.J. McCarthy in practice early on. We've mentioned the gauntlet of quality defenses they're going to face early in the season that would maybe make it so Sam Darnold goes out there, trots out until they get to the bye week or so, and then if you want to onboard J.J. from there, you could probably do that. Losing Jordan Addison would be tough, but we've seen just what Justin Jefferson's capable of in adverse situations, even without the rest of the world around him operating at 100%. He could still go and be a great lifeline.
He can, but certainly not having Jordan Addison would hurt. I mean, you don't have Kirk Cousins anymore. It's Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy. So you could use all the weapons that you could get. It's just more attention they can put to Justin Jefferson if Addison isn't there. And in July, he had a speeding ticket, I think going 140 or whatever. But that wouldn't come into play as far as discipline, because this last one, the DUI, where he was asleep blocking an oncoming ramp into a highway in his Rolls Royce, he was asleep at the wheel. This could affect it because alcohol or drugs involved can trigger a first offense 3-game suspension. So that's the possibility of what we're looking at here. And boy, you better hope this guy learns a lesson, just not get behind the wheel of a car when you had something to drink. I mean, my God.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the most important takeaway from this, right, as we've seen, plenty of these infractions and violations going on in a place like Georgia and colleges. You'd like to see the message sink in with people before the worst possible thing does happen. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. And we've covered a lot of stuff concerning the Olympics on this show since it started. We've been having a ton of fun with the games. There's been a lot of great, compelling stories. There was also one last week that got out of hand really quickly, and that involved Algerian boxer Imane Khelif, who, going back to last Thursday in her bout with the Italian Angel Carini, who tapped out after 46 seconds, saying she's too strong, that ignited a firestorm of conversation and really misinformation around a boxer who is now set to medal, who has another fight coming up this afternoon, and I think desperately is a conversation that needs reframing. And so to help us out with that right now, delighted to welcome in Katie Barnes, ESPN feature writer, the author of Fair Play, How Sports Shape the Gender Debates. Katie, good morning. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Appreciate you having me.
Appreciate your time here. So I poorly laid out a timeline there, but the debate last week centered on Imane Khelif being mislabeled as transgender, coming off of this fight, this firestorm that we've often seen in sports of people shouting, protect our women, the label of saying that this is a man boxing against women. From your vantage point, why did this go so wrong so quickly last week when this immediately kicked off?
So I think this is really a consequence of using imprecise language, right? So when people say this is a man fighting a woman, given the current tenor of the discussion and debates around transgender women participating in women's sports in the United States, within American social media and British social media, that was the immediate thought using that language. And what ended up happening was it really obfuscated the ongoing questions that have been happening in women's sports policy really since their inception, which is what is the appropriate eligibility requirements for the women's category, and how will those requirements be set and then monitored? And so there was a separate policy discussion and tension between the Boxing Federation, the IBA, and the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. And that was going on the side. And then everybody kind of latched onto it, projecting their own understanding of what this imprecise language really meant. And it just kind of caught cultural fire, as it were.
Yeah, how prevalent are the gender eligibility tests in sports?
That's a really big question, actually, Golic. I would say that really since the inception of the women's category, because when the Olympics started, women were not allowed to participate. And in general, part of the story of women's sports have been women fighting for the right to play and compete in sports as men have done. And so when women decided and were finally allowed to compete in sports, there has been a desire to monitor who is eligible for that category. And so the roots of sex verification testing have actually been found like around the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. But these are conversations that we've been having, especially in the last 10 to 15 years with Caster Semenya, the South African runner. So in terms of prevalence, there have been types of sex verification tests for a very, very long time, pretty much since women started playing sports.
And in the Olympics, they generally leave it up to the individual federations that govern the sport in the lead up to competition. You mentioned this tension between the IBA and the IOC. What was at the heart of that tension? Because all of this also stems from people using the IBA suspension from competition as kind of what they've held up as evidence that this person should not be competing in the Olympics right now.
Yeah, so the IOC essentially decertified the IBA as the Olympic Federation for Boxing because of financial transparency issues, perceived corruption issues, so completely separate problems from this discussion that we're having today. And so consequently, when the IBA disqualified both Imane Khelif and then Lin Yuting, who's a Taiwanese boxer also competing at the Olympics, from the World Championships in 2023. And the IOC decided that both of those boxers would be eligible for Olympic competition. That falls squarely in this ongoing dispute around who's regulating boxing, period. And so the IBA very strongly believes that they made the right decision in 2023, and the IOC has vigorously defended the right of Imane Khelif and Lin Yuting to compete and fight in the women's boxing category in Paris this year.
So are there currently rules in place for transgender athletes in competition? If so, what are they?
Yes, there are rules in place for transgender athletes. I think it's worth stating before I continue to answer the question that when it comes to both Imane Khelif and Lin Yuting, there is zero evidence to suggest that they are transgender women, and so would not necessarily be subject to these policies. But beginning in October of 2021, the IOC said each federation is going to set its own policies for their sport. And so the regulations from an Olympic level competition vary widely depending on your sport. So the regulations for track are a little bit different from the regulations for swimming, although they are similar. Those are different from cycling, etc. They're different in team sports. And so since that decision was made in 2021, each federation has been going through its own process to set those eligibility requirements, which is why we're in such a shifting landscape when it comes to policy. Though I will say that that landscape leans toward making it harder for transgender women to participate and be eligible to compete in the women's category at the Olympic level than it had been previously. And we've seen that in the United States as well with the passage of laws that affect youth athletes as well. So this discussion about can transgender girls and women participate and compete in girls and women's sports? It very much depends on the level that they are playing, where they live, and what the specific eligibility requirements are for their specific sport.
Katie, part of the conversation here, and we've seen and heard from both Imane, but also from Angel Carini, the fighter who she was facing that sort of sparked all of this, who came out and it really said she regretted the way that she reacted early on in this. For Imane Khelif, she came out this weekend and basically implored everyone to stop the bullying of athletes that had gone on here. And I've had a bunch of people ask me, why is this such a big deal? You mentioned the words being used. What are the ramifications when misinformation about someone's gender and identity are starting to spread the way that we saw with this?
So, for athletes, it's very personal, I think, and I can't speak for how Khelif feels, and but speaking about like Caster Semenya, who's written about her experience being sex tested after the World Championships in Berlin in 2009, it's very destabilizing. And I think, we're talking about transgender identity in some respects, because I think that's what people latched onto. But separate from that, there are, athletes who have differences of sex development or intersex traits who are also subject to different types of eligibility requirements. And sometimes those athletes don't know that they fall into that category until moments like this happen. And now that's very public information. And so you have the general public really parsing through private medical information at a high stakes moment that's incredibly emotional. And that leads to athletes individually being targeted sometimes. And I think that is one of the consequences of when we see just misinformation bubble. And it's important, I think, for everyone to take a breath and to really seek out the facts before developing a very strong opinion about it. But I think at the core, what we know is that emotions are, the main driver of sports. People love sports for that reason. And so people hold very strong opinions about gender and sex as well. And when that comes to a head in these moments, that's why we see what we saw over the last couple of days.
Could not have said it better. And as you said, we'd all be well served to take a beat and actually stop and read something that's not coming from that hell site that is Twitter as it pertains to something with as sensitive information as this. Again, you guys can check Katie out at Katie_Barnes3 on Twitter, and also the book Fair Play, How Sports Shape the Gender Debates is an excellent read, and everyone should check it out. Katie, thank you so much for the time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Thanks, Katie.
No, and Dad, incredibly important. That was sort of my first reaction watching everything that happened last week is, man, we need to all stop and take a breath. So we will do just that. We will stop and take a breath ourselves here, and we will get ready to welcome in our friend Charlotte Wilder to talk about the rest of what's gone on in Paris next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield, who I thought was taking it back for break, so I was answering a text message here. Hour number 2, going to be a fun one here, but most importantly, because it involves our good friend, your good friend, back now for a Wilder Wednesday on a Tuesday. She is Charlotte Wilder, the co-host of Oddball with Imane El Hassan, wherever you get your podcast every day but Monday. Charlotte Wilder, what's going on, bud?
Oh, she sure is back, everybody. I'm so fired up. I have so many things to say about the Olympics, and I've just been waiting for Tuesday. I was like, yesterday we recorded an Oddball, and I was like, well, also Simone Biles. And Imane was like, well, also, why don't you do that? What about GoJo? Why don't you do that on GoJo? And I was like, oh, right. Great call, because this is a basketball show. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm going to try to have more interesting takes than just, this is amazing.
We are Charlotte Wilder's sports take side piece is essentially what this has become. Because, well, I guess, I don't know, you're pretty, sports talk polygamous over here at the DK Network. Because, obviously, Oddball is your main boo, but you're over on the Levitard show a bunch there, but you're on here every week. So, Charlotte, you have so much love and so many takes to give here. So, we want to make sure that we give you the proper outlet for all that. Right, Jesse?
God forbid women have hobbies. You know what I mean?
God.
Thank you guys.
Well, Jesse, why don't you set the table for us then here with our Olympic update so we can let Charlotte Wilder unburden herself from the takes that have clogged her.
Yes, well, thank God we have Liquid IV. So it's time to jump into our Liquid IV Olympic recap. If hydrating were an Olympic sport, you would win gold. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code GoJo at checkout. All right, Simone Biles, let's get into it. Charlotte is absolutely shaking right now. All right, so she wraps up her Paris Olympics with 3 gold medals and a silver in the floor exercise. So an amazing week for her, but like maybe just, little like she got that silver. She missed out on the beam. Maybe some motivation to compete in Los Angeles. Wouldn't put it past her to compete into her 30s, even though I'm in my 30s and my body feels like it's 1,000 years old. But basically, fitting into her career, amazing. Put a bow on it, right? Not so fast, because this is God's internet and men are on it. There's obviously bad things about it. So let's get to the men being bad. All right, so we had Biles and bronze winner Jordan Chiles, right? So they're on the podium. They bowed down to Brazil's Rebecca Andrade, the gold medal winner. She broke through. She beat Biles. It was like a cool story. The girls are like showing love to the other girls, women supporting women. No. Okay, a man had to go on the internet and say, not so fast. Ravens corner Marlon Humphrey didn't like it. He posted it saying, this is literally disgusting. This is literally disgusting. So we just want to talk about this really quick before we get into how amazing Simone Biles is. Anybody have an issue with this? I thought it was cool. Women supporting women.
Yeah, so here's the thing, guys. First of all, this is the first all-black podium in women's Olympic gymnastics history.
Right.
This was a massive, massive moment, and it happened at the 2023 Worlds. And Rebecca Andrade has been second to Simone Biles her whole career, because how can you be first when Simone Biles is around? So for her to get gold on that, because Simone stepped out of bounds twice, it was a huge moment for her. And I think the fact that Simone and Jordan Chiles, who are close with her, I mean, they see each other at all of these events, the fact that they could say I think Jordan Chiles called her a queen. Simone was like, she's absolutely incredible. And it was a fun little thing. Jordan Chiles said, should we bow? And Simone was like, yeah. And I think what this is so emblematic of, to me, is how much fun Team USA has seemed to be having out there. How gymnastics is it comes from historically a very toxic, very strict, very sort of macho, also like Eastern European, like don't have any emotion, don't show anything. And so for them to be breaking out of that mold, and if anyone here has watched the Simone Biles doc, the first 2 episodes on Netflix, she talks about how she didn't feel she could have a personality. She talks about all the men on the internet eating chips on their couch, having opinions about her. She talks about how this has been such a long road back from Tokyo and how mentally difficult that was, and how some of it had to do with the abuse she endured at the hands of USA Gymnastics. And she has looked like she's having so much fun out there. And it has brought me and so many millions of people so much joy. So I think the medal count, first of all, she's 3 golds and 1 silver. Like, what more do we want, people? Secondly, I think that she seems so happy with it, like to get over what she's gotten, what she's dealt with, and get to where she is now, and just be grinning after her floor routine in the individual all around. It's like this was beautiful that they supported each other, that they bowed. I literally had no idea that. I mean, I should know better because I've been on the internet and doing sports for way too long now. I should have known that people would have a problem with this, but until I saw the show document for today, I was like, it didn't even ever cross my mind that someone could take issue with this.
I want to make this abundantly clear. I do not know if people had a problem with this. Marlon Humphrey is a professional internet troll on that team. It is well documented. So part of me's not even sure if he's serious about this or not, as he's now seen. He's like, I think I'm getting cooked in Brazilian on Instagram right now. So he has seen and felt the backlash for this, but he is a child of the internet, so he's built for it. Because I agree. This isn't something that anyone should find objectionable. Simone Biles has more gold medals than anyone could possibly know what to do with. And while, in Talladega Nights, Ricky Bobby couldn't be bothered to get second so that Cal could just enjoy a moment on the sun, Simone seemed all too ready, Dad, to just invite someone else to share in the limelight. And given the background Charlotte just described, that's pretty incredible that someone's overcome and gotten to a point where not only can she dance in the sun herself, but she can also let somebody else in and have some fun for what was one objectively a cool moment, because we've talked about Rebecca Andrade's road to the Olympics herself and what she means to her home country, what winning gold means for her home country. But two, just a dope picture. Really cool photo that now they're all going to have for the Den, which I don't think we talk about enough. Sometimes you got to do it for the gram.
Do it for the
Well,
gram.
for Rebecca, I mean, she follows, unfortunately, the Michael Jordan rules of playing in the same era as Michael Jordan. She's doing gymnastics in the same era as Simone Biles, to where you're going to finish second to her. And Simone, again, as Charlotte pointed out, stepped out of bounds twice on the floor, took her turn amongst everybody else and falling off the beam in the beam competition. I can't even believe, and I agree with you, Mike. I don't think there's people. I think this is Marlon Humphrey, and I don't know anything about Marlon Humphrey. I know him about the football player, not about the internet troll. If this is what he's doing, this is you pick your spot. This is where you go. This is the hill that you supposedly die on. I mean, but are you kidding me? I didn't look at his comments or anything because I think it's ridiculous that if one person agreed with him, I can't imagine one person agreeing that this was actually disgusting. It was a cool move against women who compete against each other all the time. I mean, it was a great moment. It was a great moment. She had a great Olympics. The U.S. team winning all around gold, had a team gold, had a great Olympics. I mean, it was just a great moment. I almost can't even believe that we're talking about one person that had a negative comment about it.
But it's the internet. Like, women are succeeding, men are going to be mad. That's
also though here, Galaxy Brain. Marlon Humphreys was actually probably paid by ESPN or a similar outfit to say this. So I mean, allegedly, this is a joke. Everybody, I'm freaking joking. But someone could have bribed him to be like, "Hey, we need a way to talk about Simone Biles on sports talk radio that isn't she unbelievable? Can you give us something? Can you say something bad so we have a foil to react to and be mad about? Because otherwise we're just going to keep saying how great she is. And we need that tension in the story so that we can say you're an idiot."
This is the Stugotz School of Fraudcasting. Stugatz doing this the other day, telling Simone Biles to stick the landing, being the one and dissenting voice. I mean, when Simone Biles talks about people at home on their couch eating chips in their basement, talking about this, she's literally painting the picture of Stugatz digesting the Olympics, where we all parachute in once every 4 years and we become experts or fall in love with these sports very quickly to the point where we're sitting here and chirping some of the greatest athletes that have ever walked God's green earth and doing it. So, yes, this is probably much ado about nothing, but it's a good chance to kind of talk about and celebrate Simone Biles, because I don't know if we'll see her again. Charlotte, to your point, all of that palpable joy, could it prompt someone who is still so clearly at the top of their game to want to stick around for more of this? It very well could, and we've seen Katie Ledecky leave the door open for that as well in the pool, who's sort of Simone's swimming counterpart in terms of Olympic level accomplishment. But as Dad often points out, there is the difference of being on that Olympic stage and being full of all of that joy and the enthusiasm that comes from there, and then having to go to the pool or the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning in the years in between that are far less sexy and usually more of the deterrent when it comes to an athlete making that kind of decision. So I don't live in Simone Biles' head. I don't know for sure, but Charlotte, she does seem happy enough to where I wouldn't rule anything out at this point.
No, I think that what I came away from the documentary so impressed by, and just by the way that she has been on social media, sort of open and funny. I mean, she's also very funny. I don't think people talk enough about how funny Simone Biles is. If you watch that doc, like, she has some great jokes. Allie Raisman is always saying, like, she calmed me down because she could be just silly and goofy. Like, I think Simone Biles as a funny person needs to get way more attention than it gets.
Well, sometimes unintentionally funny because she couldn't figure out how to do the F around and find out. She couldn't figure out how to do the shorthand for it and turn it into an acronym.
She's a genius. She's like the comedy. It just like comes out of her. I love it.
I don't know if that one was genius as much as it was a wonderful bit of little happenstance, but we'll take it.
Well, you never know. If anyone sees the bigger picture, it's Simone Biles. I think what I came away with is that I think that she is in a place in her life where she's not making any statements for anybody. She's not telling anybody anything that she isn't 100% sure of. She probably doesn't know. I feel like there is an element to this that she and her teammates kept saying she's writing the end of her own story. So to me, it seems like I would be probably surprised if she I wouldn't be surprised if she came back. She's Simone, but I think the way that it's been being talked about, to me, internally from what I've seen externally, seems like she might be done. But I also think that we just need to give her credit for being funny, because that's very important.
I don't take anybody's word seriously right after a competition. Just like an NFL season, when a player says, I'm gonna retire, or you just don't do it right after. It seems right after the Olympics to say, yeah, you never say never. I might be back. I just put it all aside and say, you got to give it time. You got to let it all settle down and decide if you want to put that work in for the different meets, the different world championships, and in 4 years, the Olympics. So whatever the answers are after an Olympics, after a big event, I don't put a lot into them because it's coming off the high or in some cases the low of a performance, and to try and decide in a normal sport, if you're going to do it next year, let alone the Olympics, which is in 4 years, is just, I think, very difficult to I guess, lay your hands on right after the Olympics and say, yeah, I'm looking forward to the next Olympics, unless you're 21. I'm talking about the older competitors who are going to be, in their 30s.
I mean, she is right now in the 2024 Olympics at age 27, the oldest American gymnast to compete since the 50s. So
yeah, and I think, yeah, she is already broken ground in terms of what you can do at this sport at this age. So we'll wait and see what the decision for her looks like. But gymnastics and swimming were, I think, kind of the big portion of the first part of the Olympics. Basketball and soccer sort of a through line here. But getting towards the later stages here, how in on track and field are you guys and some of the other sports that have popped up here? We've certainly had Noah Lyles as the big story, I think, so far in track and field. We're still getting ready for Sydney McLaughlin to kind of go out and assert her dominance in the way that we all expect in the battle with Femke Bol. But Charlotte, where have you been at on track and field as this gotten started now that the U.S. has the fastest man alive again?
If there's a what do you call it? A gear higher than locked in. If there's something more than a seatbelt, I'm in a rocket ship strapped in, ready to go down. Like, I'm going to fall from the sky. That, like, I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm so into track and field. I'm so in, guys. I was watching sailing reruns last night at like. Well,
that's
10:30.
Not surprising, knowing you.
Fair. All right. Never mind. But the
right
kayak cross, like, you have the Fox sisters from Australia battling against each other, and all of a sudden I'm an expert in kayak cross, and I'm like, I must know if Noemi is going to go through. And did Julia? Maybe not Julia. Julia Fox is a celebrity. So never mind. But okay, track and field, GoJo. Here's the thing.
Well, yeah.
my husband he was a long jumper, and he ran track as some of the athletic thing. He's much more athletic than I did. He played a lot of things, but he is like very knowledgeable about track and field, which I admittedly was not. And since being with him, I know everybody's name. I know most of their times. Like, it has been a beautiful thing in our relationship, but also I have watched all of the worlds and all the things leading up to it over the past couple of years. So it's a really cool feeling to not just like parachute in, but be like, oh, Mondo, like, he's gonna break the Mondo Duplantis, my favorite pole vaulter.
Oh.
Like, of course. It's Sydney McLaughlin.
I'm glad you brought up Mondo, by the way. This guy, I mean, are we freaking serious with the guy that was born in Lafayette, Louisiana, out here competing for Sweden right now? I had to look into this because I saw a bunch of people talking about this. By the way, shout out to Bunky Perkins on Twitter for helping people realize there is an Popeyes Popeyes buffet in Lafayette, Louisiana. It's one of the only places I know that has a Popeyes buffet restaurant in the town. So run and tell that. How could a man who's from a place that beautiful want to deny that and go? So how it works, his mom is from Sweden. He's a dual citizen. His brother also competes in track and field for Sweden. And he grew up, apparently, I looked into this, it was his youth coach who is from Sweden. Originally, Mondo, who went to LSU, who shattered a bunch of records and was a national champion at LSU and did all these great things here in America, wanted to compete in America. And according to an Athlon Sports article I saw, his youth coach reached out to his dad and was like, hey, does Mondo want to come and compete for us with his brother? And he was like, no, Mondo doesn't. And then the youth coach was like, hey, Greg, his dad, do you want a job coaching with us to coach your son and his brother on the team? And then all of a sudden, he wants to go and compete for Sweden and win then a bunch of medals. They basically stole the SEC football playbook where they just go and offer dad or mom a job and then get him over here. I should say the college football playbook at large. The SEC doesn't just get to own that. I have to respect it begrudgingly, Charlotte, but those should be our medals. Those should be ours. He's from LSU. He's from Louisiana. Come back home. What are you doing?
I mean, I did have a thought yesterday watching him break his own world record. I was like, if he were from the US pole vaulting, like everybody would be obsessed with pole vaulting. The one thing I will say, and I understand, Mike, I understand that you see him as a traitor. You how can you turn your back on a Popeyes buffet? I get it.
Yes.
One thing I will say, Sweden does have universal health care. So there's something to be said for competing for a country where it's like they have universal health care. Like, sorry, US, I just got a doctor's bill for $2,000. Like, it just, there's part of it where I'm sort of like, okay, I can see where you'd want to represent that.
Yeah, he's Sweden. He's neutral. He's neutral. I don't know.
If he can look me in the eye and tell me those IKEA meatballs are better than gumbo and jambalaya and everything else that he can get back home, then I'll throw my hands up and walk away from the situation. But Jesse, that doesn't seem possible.
Well, I just want to say he's so good. Like, I feel like you see this sometimes where athletes aren't good enough to make the U.S. team, so then they'll be like, oh, well, I have dual citizenship. I'm going to go compete for this other country, which my kids are Polish citizens. So they will have the opportunity one day to choose if they want to compete for America or Poland. So,
Jesse, start training them in sharpshooting right now.
Right now.
Yes.
All right, it's on.
Or they could be Polish vaulters.
Kayak. Oh my God.
Wow. Hey, you know what?
Let's go.
This is all distracting us. We haven't once talked about the French pole vaulter who got his very well-endowed penis stuck on the thing. And I know people have tried to come out after the fact and say that his knee actually hit it before and that wasn't what DQ'd him. But DQ'd by way of penis seems like a lot better way to go out. And I know people feel bad. No man feels bad for that guy because he just got some of the best free advertising on God's green earth this weekend.
Yeah.
Yep, sure did.
It's unbelievable.
Sure did.
Shout out to French guy.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Can't
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Charlotte Wilder here on a Tuesday. Guys, let's talk about the street. Rough day on Wall Street. I know nothing about it. I don't think we're going to attribute it to a singular person. I'm not an economist, okay? But we will look at some super stocks that are rising and falling. And no, we're not actually talking about what's going on Wall Street. We're going to talk Super Bowl stocks. By the way, Julian Edlow did a deep dive on this. Go follow him at Julian Edlow on Twitter for more. So anyway, here are some teams that odds have improved the most since we opened the 2025 Super Bowl odds on the DraftKings Sportsbook. So these are teams whose stocks have gone up. We got Kansas City Chiefs. They went from plus 850 to plus 500. Eagles going from plus 2200 to plus 1500, etc. I'm not going to go through and read all of these. But you guys, which stocks are you going to be buying now? Okay, what do we think?
Well, I was going to say, as an amateur economist here, bad time to buy for these teams right now. Should have bought low and sold high. Econ 101 for you guys there. But a lot of these not surprising because some of these odds also came out during the 2023 postseason, I believe. And so I'm sure the Chiefs going on and winning another Super Bowl probably helps the way that they're viewed as an unstoppable force of nature's fury. But, Dad, if I'm looking at teams who I'm buying the rise on here, the Eagles seem like the obvious one just because personnel-wise, it can't get much worse than it was last year. The fact that jumped with some of the offseason moves and the draft that they had, what Howie Roseman's done restocking the coffers around that team, and with the coaching changes here after last year, the house got fully cleaned out when Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen both left. Now you get two more coordinators that come in with a lot of experience to, I think, level set this. So the Eagles going from 2,200 to 1,500 makes a lot of sense to me for a team that is absolutely within shouting distance of their division mate in the Dallas Cowboys again in that conference.
Oh, I think they're above the Dallas Cowboys in that division right now. I firmly believe Dallas has taken a step back, and I definitely think of the stock going up. I do think the Eagles will be the one. That's the one you could still make a buck on at plus 1,500. Just for all the reasons that you mentioned, compared to all the other teams, the Chiefs, it would be the safe bet, but not a lot of coinage you'd make. The Texans, the Steelers, the Rams, the Seahawks, I just don't see it as much as the Eagles in the development they have of two new coordinators, as you said, experienced coordinators, and some of the new players that they got. So I would firmly be in their corner.
Yep, Charlotte, unfortunately, this is not going to apply to your team, the New England Patriots, but do you like any of what's on the menu with these teams?
Yeah, well, something that is interesting to me is that the Bills went from plus 900 to plus 1,500, which seems very low to start because the Eagles went from, what is it here? The Eagles were plus 2,200 to 1,500. For the Bills to have started that much better and now be on par. I don't know. Sometimes things like that, Stephon Diggs isn't there anymore. So sometimes things like this puzzle me a little bit. And I'm not totally sure. I'm like, do I not understand what's going on? Or is this something that I'm missing here, GoJo?
Yeah, well, I think it is interesting to consider those because Charlotte's right. If we're looking at teams where maybe we want to buy the dip, to use a stock term that we explained to my dad a while back, if we want to buy the dip on somebody, the Bills' odds going down like that, albeit they play in the much harder conference in football as everyone views the AFC. In the AFC East, obviously, you've got the Miami Dolphins that just re-signed all of their marquee skill talent as a prime contender. The Jets, if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy this year, certainly make that division a bit more difficult than it has been for the Buffalo Bills, let alone then the prospect of having to beat Baltimore, certainly having to get over the Kansas City-sized hump that Buffalo hasn't been able to mount yet. Even if, Dad, I believe, and these are odds, again, to win the Super Bowl, not to win their division or anything else, but to win the Super Bowl where, anyone south of Kansas City feels like a gamble, especially on the AFC side where they've just proven they're the ceiling. They're that LeBron James-sized stopper from the old Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna make a couple of bucks, you got to take the chance, and I would take it on the first two of the stock down, the Bills and the Dolphins at plus 1,500 and plus 2,200. Anybody after that, I don't even think they can find their way in. Quite honestly, again, this is to win the Super Bowl, where the Bills and the Dolphins, I think, at least have a chance. I don't think it'll happen, but I would throw a couple of bucks on it just for the fact
Dad,
that you could make.
If I made you pick Bills or Eagles, since they're at the same odds, since Bills and Eagles are both at plus 1,500 right now, which of those two teams would you take?
I would take the Eagles. I think the NFC is less stacked than the AFC, so I would take the Eagles for sure.
I also think, not that, team vibes carry from year to year. The Eagles have choked fewer times, I would say, than the Bills historically. So maybe just going with like the football vibes of it all. I think that it's really disrespectful and rude of everyone to say that they wouldn't take the New England Patriots at 18,000 at plus 18,000. That's I think it's sometimes nice to have the bar set low, because then you can only impress people, shall we say.
Yeah, we'll go with that, right?
Yeah.
Now, listen, you guys got Matthew Judon back in camp. It sounds like Drake Mays had a couple of decent days. So we'll focus on the positive with the New England Patriots here and not the negative. Dad, how far would you go down on this list? You said of teams that you believe actually have a chance of getting towards the Super Bowl that we've talked about here, because the interesting ones to me, the Colts have been everyone's darling so far this offseason. So seeing them drop from 4,000 to 6,500 seems to fly in the face of what a lot of people believe about them being a dark horse team. Anthony Richardson being certainly someone that could boost your fantasy team this year because of what he poses as a runner and a passer. And then a team like the Vikings going from plus 5,000 to plus 8,000, where, I understand you're bringing in a rookie quarterback situation, but Kevin O'Connell is someone that's incredibly well respected as a play caller, as a head coach. So how far down the list do you go of teams that you actually believe can win it?
Man, not far down. I mean, Jacksonville at least has a proven quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. But the Colts with Anthony Richardson, he's a crapshoot, right? He can be great for your fantasy teams, but you don't know if he's going to be able to lead this team to wins. Vikings, you got two quarterbacks you're going to choose from. You got Tampa Bay. They just, anybody in the NFC South doesn't get, I think, any respect. Because they're basically 500 teams, and somebody has to make the playoffs. So could one of those teams surprise? Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta now with the offensive firepower they have. You wonder about the defensive side. So I really couldn't go with Jacksonville, I would say, and outside chance Tampa Bay. I would go, because again, with more proven quarterbacks than the Vikings and the Colts.
I do think that the Chargers here going from 3,000 to 4,500. I know that Herbert has plantar fasciitis. He's in a boot, but he's in a boot for 2 weeks. They say he'll be ready for the regular season. I think that this could be a place where you could get some value if you put money on that now, just because I think, for all you can say about Jim Harbaugh, I think that he knows how to, he can really get the best out of people if it happens to match his particular coaching style, which for some reason I sort of think Herbert and the Chargers do. So that's some place that I actually think might, I'm sort of surprised that it dropped that much, to be honest, but we may be getting to a point soon where the Chargers ... underrated becomes a thing that we talk about, because we've harped so much on the receiving core loss there. Yeah. I'll still say, for a conversation of the floor of Super Bowl contending teams, where we go down to the bottom, I know right now, a couple of O-line injuries in camp, a little bit concerning, and Puka Nacua on the sideline too, day to day at this point, I believe, coming off a joint practice. But I can't quit the Rams. The Rams at plus 3,000, to me, if the defense hits at all, are a team that absolutely, I think, could be a sneaky Super Bowl contender. Certainly in contention for a top 5 offense like we've talked about, but replacing Aaron Donald in the aggregate with a team that we know just in general has a healthy winning culture and has done a good job going from them picks to onboarding a bunch of young draft picks that are going to slowly become the face of that team. I can't quit them. I don't know how to. I don't know if I will. The good news is we get to add to the sample size, because coming up this weekend, we got more preseason games. We will tell you what to watch for heading into preseason 1 for your favorite team next here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield here, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Charlotte Wilder. And as we inch closer to preseason games this week, let's highlight a few of those said games and score their watchability, okay? The criteria is very scientific in the way that nobody really understands what we're talking about. But let's give it a scale from 0 to 100, okay? We're going to start with Lions and Giants on Thursday. I think we might get a decent score here. We were talking about this in the break. We saw some fights on the field, like Giants on the field after we saw their offseason unfold and Hard Knocks. Malik Neighbors' anticipation. Dan Campbell, always a good soundbite. The people love it. So what is the score we're giving this game, guys?
So this one, guys, to me is heavily dependent on if we get Daniel Jones in the game at all, which I believe the last time I was trying to look up last night, haven't heard if Brian Daboll is going to go through with that or not. Now, if we don't get him, we get Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito, which still feels like a bit of a win, but Daniel Jones is the bit of intrigue in here. Yeah, no, you'd forgotten about our sweet Italian son still out here making it happen in camp, bada bing, bada boom.
Okay, come on. First of all, you think I forgot about Tommy DeVito? You think I don't follow Sean Stellato, Tommy DeVito's agent? You don't think I've seen him in Italy this summer? I have. Here's the thing. What I think is funny about this, also, if we get Hendon Hooker from the Lions, that would be really fun.
Important camp for him.
Zone at one point. And I think that I love that Daniel Jones, I know you guys already talked about the fight. I just want to say real quick, I feel like Daniel Jones was like, what can I do to make people take me seriously as a real quarterback who is not going to just get pushed out at the end of my deal? I'm going to start a fight with Dan Campbell's Lions, because if there's one thing people respect, it's Dan Campbell. And I really appreciate it. So even if we don't get those quarterbacks going up against each other, I think this will be fun because of the excitement and sort of animosity that was stirred up in that joint practice like 8 times.
Yeah, the fight, and there won't be those fights in the preseason game. That'll all be tamped down. The name you mentioned, Charlotte, is the one that interests me, is Hendon Hooker, who had his redshirt year last year with the knee injury, and what he's going to try and do to become the backup of that team. I think going against Nate Sudfeld, because I think that's going to be really something to watch, because we know Goff's not going to play, Penei Sewell's not going to play, other starters aren't going to play in this game. So I am really, really going to keep an eye. To me, that's the watchability of this game is a guy who won't be playing, in the regular season as long as Jared Goff is healthy. But how Hendon Hooker, because I liked him coming out of college, and that knee injury really was devastating.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been sort of an up and down camp for him so far. Nate Sudfeld's a guy who's played NFL games, so certainly has a leg up in experience. But I think if you're a Lions fan, you're in the mode where it's don't get hurt. That's all you want to get out of this. So watchability, I'll say this one's a 72, because I don't believe that Daniel Jones is going to end up playing. It's fun because, and I remember being told this when I was going through training camp as a player, teams that are well coached, their backups mimic the behavior of starters, because everything goes through message-wise in that locker room. And Detroit seems like a place where you're going to get the same kind of effort and enthusiasm and dedicated to the lines of scrimmage that you see with the starters. So I'll go 72 on that one. And let's move along to Charlotte squad, as we've got the Panthers at the Patriots coming up Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Charlotte, again, Gerard Mayo still deciding what Drake May's playing time is going to look like, how much starters are going to see the field on this one. What are you excited to watch for New England this preseason?
Is this a trick question? I'm excited that these are the two worst teams in the NFL, pretty much, going up against each other. And I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. As I said, the odds of plus 18,000, like the bar's low. I'm excited. That's what I'm excited for. I'm excited because it seems pretty bleak right now. We'll see if Drake May plays. He probably won't. If he does, that'll be cool just to see what's up. Also, if he doesn't, let's see what else we got there, because, quarterbacks get hurt sometimes. Let's see how those other guys do. I don't know, guys. This is
a score of 10 on watchability.
Yeah, this is bad.
Just because it's football. I'll give it a look. But I mean, You have Carolina maybe not playing a lot of their starters because they've gone through injuries. Their backup Andy Dalton's already hurt. Jonathan Brooks coming off the injury from Texas. Bryce Young may not play in the preseason. I mean, a guy who you think could use reps. Now, again, I preface this by saying practice reps are important. If you're practicing with another team, that's important, can be more important than the preseason games because you really get
at this
a
point,
mix and match
every
in
rep
the
is
preseason
important
games.
for Bryce Young.
I think I'm remembering now trying to defend Bryce Young last year because he came back and got the score close at the end of a game. So if that's what we're hanging our hat on. I don't know. This is making me sad. What else do we have, GoJo?
Can I just say this? I'm worried about the Panthers already. Like, it has been a very suspicious lack of buzz coming out of that camp. We talk, one of the favorite tried and true sports TV segments is second-year quarterbacks looking to make the leap, and there's almost no buzz about Bryce Young coming out of Panthers camp that I have heard right now. And again, Jonathan Brooks, one of the weapons that we sell coming off that knee injury at Texas last year, hasn't been on the field. Xavier Leggett at this point had dealt with a hamstring for a lot of OTAs and minicamp and then comes into camp now. And thankfully, I think MRIs were negative, but is day-to-day with a lower leg injury that he sustained the other day. And so a lot of these factors that were supposed to help Bryce Young have been in flux or onboarding still and are young. But just in general, if this was a guy that had been showing any signs at all, I feel like someone would have raised their hand and said something right now. And the fact that it's not happening is making me a little bit nervous as we start to talk about this. Like, I got asked point blank the other day, if I had to bet on someone coming off of this season and improving their stock more, would it be Will Levis or Bryce Young? And I said Will Levis, because at this point, I don't know what you can do with the foundation of Bryce Young. I'm hopeful for him because I liked the player and was bullish on him coming out of college, but there's not, it's one of those things. We're not going to place everything in the preseason, but it is a concerning lack of conversation coming out of that camp about that quarterback in particular. It's not even that there's a negative thing being said, it's that there's nothing being said, and that sort of freaks me out a little bit. So we will move on here. Let's get one more game in now. Let's go with Green Bay at Cleveland, Saturday at 4:25. They obviously, Dad, were at the center of the conversation that we had today surrounding a potential trade framework for Brandon Aiyuk, who's got the Patriots and the Browns, both with deals apparently in place that San Francisco has signed off on. So Green Bay, again, while being one of the youngest rosters in the NFL, I can't imagine we're going to see much of Jordan Love and the guys that actually mean something to this team. But I am excited to see at least the base level stuff, because we know it's all very bland in these preseason games, but just what flavor of the defense now Jeff Hafley brings over to Green Bay, even if it's with the backups out there. I am curious to see how different that looks first rattle out of the box, because that's going to go a long way for this team.
Yeah, that's been a big issue of that Green Bay defense, and now changing coordinators, and see if the relationship can be better between coordinator and players. Offensively, no first-round pick for Cleveland to watch. Cleveland got that old line that's banged up, and no more Bill Callahan as the O-line coach. So that's a position of concern for me, and you won't see a lot of it in preseason because these guys won't be, the main starters won't be out there playing. So again, this is more watchability than Carolina and the Panthers for sure. But I'd probably put it in the 50 range of watchability.
What, GoJo?
I'll go 75 just because, and I forgot this is part of the roster jumbling in the offseason here. Jameis Winston's the backup in Cleveland. So if we're getting extended Jameis action in the preseason, where last time on Dragon Ball Z we saw Jameis Winston authoring a late game coup to score a touchdown for the running back in New Orleans, then I will sign up for that one. I'll put that at a smooth 80 if we're getting extended Jameis.
Okay, if we're going to talk about guys, naming some guys, the Raiders backup, people forget, Gardner Minshew. So I am very excited. Who are the Raiders playing? I just had it in my head, but
Minnesota.
Minnesota. Okay, yeah, I'm excited for that. Because if Gardner Minshew gets out there, I will give that an 80.
All right, Minshew Mafia, stand up. We're in the building. Coming up next, White Sox Mafia, stand down, go cry, we're so sorry on GoJo and Golic. All right, guys, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick ones to send you off on your way. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review our show. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the DraftKings Network. If you missed that or our great guests, and thank you to Katie Barnes, who joined us earlier, ESPN feature writer, talking about the situation with Imane Khelif, the boxer from Algeria, who's getting set to fight again today in the Olympics. And, of course, our good friend Charlotte Wilder, who you can catch with Oddball with me and El Hassan every day but Monday here on DraftKings Network. Make sure you give them a download, subscribe, rate, and review as well, as Charlotte gives us the little bubble thumbs up. Guys, let's get to this, that, and the third. You can't say we don't cater to our guests here, because the photo for this is something I'm sure tugged at your heartstrings, Charlotte. We got a picture from the Olympic Village yesterday of Tom Brady hanging out with the Boston Celtics championship members of Drew Holiday, Derek White, and Jason Tatum. They're on Team USA, of course, and Tom Brady, Pander Poppy himself, knowing the proclivities of the head coach of the Boston Celtics, tags it with the town 2010 of all of them. So, Charlotte, this Boston royalty doing it for you?
Yeah, I saw this and I was like, at first I was like, oh, that's so nice. Tom Brady's hanging out with the basketball guys. And then I was like, those are the basketball guys that I love. And I'm just like, anytime Tom Brady does something pandering to New England, there's a part of me that's like, okay, he's still like, we're still in his heart. Do you know what I mean? Because it was so ugly at the end when he left. And so there's always, and the town, and oh God, Jesse, you start talking.
This is called breadcrumbing. It's what men do to women when they're dating them, and they don't want them to leave, but they also don't want to commit to them, so they breadcrumb. So Tom Brady just breadcrumb in New England. He's like, oh, you like that?
I was going to say, Dad, Charlotte, when she was describing that, sounded like a very toxic relationship.
Yeah, she was
me,
like,
so I didn't want to
She was like, maybe he's
okay. I'm sorry. You guys think being a sports fan is so healthy and good for you?
No,
like, come on. What are we doing?
It's bad.
So I looked at this as just a picture, but there's a method to the madness. Is that
Senior,
so? I'm
it's
lost
not
in
just
this.
a picture.
On,
it's like an onion. There's 50 layers of
Walk
meaning.
into F-Boy 101 with us, please. We beg you.
Like, Senior, what does it mean when he likes your Instagram story?
I don't want to.
Come on.
I like my simplicity, quite honestly.
What if he's watching your Instagram stories, but he doesn't actually like any of your pictures?
What does it mean?
How am I supposed to read into that? Now you're going and checking your story to see, did he watch it this time here? Why isn't he watching it this time? Do I need to post a thirst trap now? I don't know. There's a whole bunch of politics. And quite honestly, this is the world Tom Brady is living in again, because while his social presence, very well curated, like the people that run his social do a phenomenal job. Shadowlion, I think, is the company. But for Tom Brady himself, you can always tell when it's him, because the weird, like, post-divorce thirst traps that have started to pop up for Tom a bit now, that's where you can tell he's going rogue.
Yeah, he did that on Insta for his birthday, and he was like, LOL, everyone knows you're allowed to post a selfie on your birthday. I was like, oh, come on, man.
Why does Tom need to do these things?
He doesn't.
Tom freaking
Back on the
Brady.
market now, baby.
There it is. No, that's the thing. He doesn't, which is why it makes it a little, you cringe at, you're like, Tom, you don't have to, but he's doing it anyway. And you know what? Who am I to judge someone putting themselves out there in what they think is the sexiest way possible? Good for Tom.
I'm just saying, the supermodels will find him in his home if he so wishes. So he just doesn't need to do that.
This harkens back to one of the truest Twitter threads ever authored by Solomon, Missouri. You don't want to be out here. You might think you want to be out here, but you don't want to be out here. So charcoal ice cream, all those things that are probably already in Tom's diet, maybe make that transition a little bit easier. Let's make this transition easier for my dad and get to that, Jesse, as the White Sox are reaching unparalleled levels of despair, and in this case, somewhat like unironically so.
Yeah, they're in a bad spot, all right? They've lost 21 straight, an American League record. If they keep losing, though, they're going to have the chance to do the funniest thing possible. So the all-time mark is 23 straight losses. They'll break the all-time losing streak on Friday against the Cubs with 3 more losses, okay? But that's not the best part. Friday is scheduled to be post-game fireworks. So if they lose those games, they will celebrate the all-time losing streak mark with a fireworks show. Guys, the writers went off with this one. I mean, you couldn't script it better or worse, I guess.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
See, I appreciate that this is at least unintentional. Like, you guys remember the Cleveland Browns did the parade for the perfect 0-16 season that felt a little cruel because it was contrived. They actually had to think and plan for that, and they had the time because they were in the middle of that season from hell. The fact that, I mean, these things get, put on the calendar long before they could have ever seen this losing streak coming. So, Dad, this does make it funnier for all of us. I cannot imagine the despair inside that clubhouse. Losing at this level, even if you're being paid well to do so, just makes everything hurt.
Now, at least their next 2 games, they do play the A's. The A's, by the way, do have 20 more wins than the White Sox, even though they're bringing up the bottom of the American League West. They do have 20 more wins than Chicago does. But yeah, this is just the how ironic it is, right? Of just it falling on this date. But man, because is that why people would hang around even on the if they set the record, the 24th loss? Will they hang around for the fireworks?
The only silver lining I can think here is that hopefully it can bring a little bit of levity to the players. Hopefully it can, like, how can you not laugh about that? And maybe if you start laughing, things start loosening up a little bit, and then you might start winning. I think it was Patty Smith who said, sometimes, I'm paraphrasing, if I feel bad, I smile, because then sometimes you start laughing and then you just go, all right. Like, that's what the White Sox need right now. Also, this is shades of the 2023-2024 Detroit Pistons. It's just teams. This happens to teams. And if you happen to be on it, it's pretty bad. But also, like, if you can find any bit of levity or dark humor in it, I think that's the key to breaking these losing streaks, guys.
They should have found levity a while ago. They should have been laughing already.
Well,
they should be at that.
They should have signed levity at the trade deadline.
Sometimes it has to get so bad. Like, sometimes it has to be so bad.
It's like rock bottom. I can go lower. Yeah.
Promise. They go low, we go lower. The motto of the 2024 White Sox. Jesse, let's go all the way to the bottom and get to the third here. What do we got?
Yeah, so just like us, the Oregon Duck is ready for football to start. He's been on the road trying to get into the Big Ten stadiums. No luck so far. Some cutesy little tweets from the Oregon Duck. Guys, this is kind of hysterical, though. Like, should we see more of the mascots getting into their own mischief on the interwebs? Like, I think this is endearing and cute.
As someone who famously has been on the mascot beat, the thing that I find funniest about this is that they have a budget to send the Oregon Duck around the country and do social media about, like, that these places, these are public institutions. Like, they had to put that was a line item, send the Duck to Purdue. Like, it doesn't get better than that. College football remains undefeated.
I wonder if the Duck flies first class. I wonder if that is built into the budget for this. I wonder if they've
chartered a plane for the Duck.
They weren't like, we could just
does
Photoshop
he get to use
this?
Phil's jet?
Did they Photoshop it?
I wonder if it's the same mascot in the suit or multiple people
well,
in the
they
suit.
could just
because a
send
lot of
the suit. Yeah.
Charlotte, do you have something to report on this? You perked up.
Well, Senior, sometimes these programs will have multiple different people who can hop in because the demands of a mascot are actually far, far, far more heavy than people think. And so it probably is a varying degree of people. I would say if they're doing a cross-country tour, it's probably one person because that limits. Anyway, this was my
I think
life
they
for a
actually
little while.
have switched the Duck at halftime before because Oregon's one of the places that makes the mascot do push-ups for the point score. And the Oregon offense in recent years has been so prolific, going all the way back to Chip Kelly, that I think at times they have had mascots on standby at halftime for lactic acid purposes. So,
bottom line is the Oregon mascot budget is higher than any other Big Ten budget for the mascots, I would think.
Yeah, it's that Phil Knight money.
It is. It's that Phil Money. It's part of why I actually might pick them to win the Big Ten this year. I know all the buzz has been on Ohio State, but the more and more I look at this team, they got it. The quarterback's a little bit better. I trust the line a little bit more. I'm not ready. That's why I'm putting it at the end of the podcast. If you've listened this long, thank you. Download, subscribe, rate, and review. Leave us a 5-star rating. And don't tell anyone yet about my take that Oregon's going to win the Big Ten. We'll debut it another day. Thanks. We'll talk to you tomorrow. See ya.